Hey everybody, it's Mike Sherwood and welcome to my YouTube channel, Don't Waste Your Life, where I remind you to be present, to be happy, and to be thankful. If you're new to the channel, I'd ask that you subscribe below, and if you've been here before, thanks for coming back again. So for this episode, I'm going to talk through my top 5 tips on how to be effective as a remote worker. So these are my personal opinion and tips that I've used over the years to be effective, and so I can hear it. Everybody's saying, well, what kind of experience do you truly have with this? Well, since I moved to North Carolina, I would say that I've worked remote most of my career. So like probably about the last 7 or 8 years, I've at least worked partially remote, if not fully remote. So like in my current job I'm pretty much fully remote. My previous role, I was fully remote for the most part because my leadership was back in San Jose. I've been doing this for quite a while. Obviously, there are some things I miss about being in person, but that's just one of those things you kind of go with, and you figure out how you can best utilize the remote working environment for your particular situation. During the coronavirus, the average worker is actually working 2 hours more a day because we don't have commute times anymore. We're not commuting, we're not going anywhere. The lines between work and regular life has become blurred. While I'm very blessed that I have a house that's fairly large, I can actually put physical boundaries between where I work, where I play, where I do my family life. There are other people out there that literally when they're working from home, they're working on their bed because that's the only place that they have. They don't have a desk, or I've even heard some people that actually have their work desk in a closet. That's why I'm saying it really depends upon the situation, how people are working. And so this can create some challenges. And in addition to that, it almost seems like the demands from the leadership of companies has become more because I know it sounds kind of weird, but it's almost like a privilege to work from home, where I don't look at it as a privilege. I look at it as like right now it's a necessity with what's going on with the coronavirus. People have to be okay with this. And I understand some people are saying, well, hey, I'm not a remote worker. I actually have to go into, I'm a salesperson. I have to go visit people in person. Okay, I get that. Or, hey, I'm, working fast food. Well, I get that. Then yeah, you can't work remotely. But I would say if there's certain areas of your work where you could do it remotely, you should have a conversation with your leadership. Set realistic boundaries on what that would look like, because I think most people could work remotely. It's just a matter of setting it up. And I understand certain circumstances that may not be possible. For example, working in retail or something like that. I get that. So as I mentioned, in this video, I'm going to talk through the 5 top tips that I have on remote working, how I'm effective. So tip number 5 is to focus on the transitions. So what I mean by this is think about when you get ready to go to work and you're normally going to work. What do? Normally you wake up, you get up. When you're working from home, you could still do all this stuff, including changing your clothes into something that's work appropriate. The reason why this is important is because this is signaling to your brain that, hey, a transition has started. This is where I need to be this or that. And then at the end of the day, you could switch back into your regular clothes. This just helps kind of move from one area to another. And so it doesn't have to be clothes. It could be, hey, when you're working at work, you could put your contacts on. And when you're done for the day, you take your contacts off and you wear your glasses. So there could be many things. Or, forcing yourself to go out for a walk to clear your head. So you got to focus on these transition times. You could set a timer for every hour and a half. And then at the hour and a half, you get up, you step away, and you go do something. So you got to figure out where those transition points are, and you have to do them, because if you don't, then you will continue to work much longer than the average person. There have been days when I didn't remember to do my transitions, that literally it was like 7 o'clock at night, and I looked outside, and the only thing that helped me transition was realizing it was dark outside. So number 4, I recommend separating workspaces from your home spaces. And I understand not everybody can do this, because depending upon the size of the house or different things, you may not be able to do this. For me, I actually have an office. So what I do is I close the door, and I'll even lock the door to try to keep my little monster out. My wife has an office. She does the same thing. The only time I usually come into this office is when I'm going to work, I'm going to record a video, or I'm going to work on my business stuff. I don't even game in here anymore in this place. It's primarily a work setting. It's very important to have that separation. And so once I step out of here, I'm done working. Same thing with my wife. She primarily just works in her office. She doesn't work anywhere else. It's very important to have that. So what you could actually do, like let's say you don't have the space to do this. You could go work somewhere else, like a Starbucks. And if it's nice weather outside, you can work outside remotely. So then that way you have transitions. Or you could go to a park. Like you could find different areas where you could work. If you have a hot spot, you could find ways, if you don't want to go to a physical office, if that's what you want to do, there's ways you can do that. And this also will actually work into another point we'll talk about in a little bit. You got to find ways to separate that out and be able to have those particular settings for you to be able to be effective in your work. So another thing you got to do here with separating work and home life for your apps on your phone is, I know some people are very good about this. Like my wife is really good about not installing work stuff on her phone. I am not so good. I wish I was like her. So what I do though is I turn off my notifications. After work, I have it set. I actually have most of it pre-programmed into Teams and other stuff that it will just either log me off or it will stop the notifications. And I also do that with work. So when I'm focused at work and I'm doing deep work, I actually have focus modes I can turn off so I won't get notifications. And just in general, I've turned off most of the notifications on my phone except for the ones I feel that are truly important. I know some people are saying, well, hey, I'm in like a support role, I have to have that. Well, I understand that. Then maybe what you do is you turn that off during dinner times or other stuff. You gotta find ways to separate that out. And one of the other things you could do is if you have to check that stuff, have a second device. Because the thing is what you don't want to have is you don't want to have it where, and I do this, you're on the weekend and you're checking your work emails because it's just such a habit. And I do this because it's so frictionless. It's so easy to do that. Having those separation of devices, that could help also. So my number 3 tip is to organize your work or organize your day based upon the type of work that you need to do. What I mean by this is if you're a person that has a lot of meetings, maybe you only schedule those meetings on certain days. Or if you need to have a lot of time to do deep work, you schedule this at a certain time or a certain day of the week. For example, I know somebody that does all their one-on-ones on Wednesdays and then has other meetings earlier in the week. So that's what I'm saying, like it just depends on how you want to do this. And a lot of this has to do with how your energy is or how your focus will be, or will you potentially be interrupted by other personal life things at different times. So if that's the case, then you want to schedule accordingly. So like let's say for example you're going to be largely unavailable after 4 p.m. Maybe you don't schedule meetings during those times or block your calendar out. If you're able to do other work during that time, that's great. You know you could still work on that, but then you're not being pulled into a meeting where you have to give input. You wouldn't necessarily be able to be as focused. For me personally, how I do this is, for me, 9 to 12 or 9 to 11:30 is my deep focused work. That is where I get my work done. Nobody's bothering me. I keep my heads down. I turn off my notifications. I'm just very focused. And then between 12 and about 2 to 3, just depending upon the day, is usually when I do my meetings, my catch up, my one-on-ones with people, or my daily stand-up. And then towards the end of the day, I'm actually wrapping up. So like between 3 and 5 or 5:30, I'm wrapping up to prepare to be optimized for that 9 to 12 block the next day. Because that is the area where I get most of my work done throughout the day. This could look different depending upon your energy level, depending upon what you do for work. But by blocking out for the type of work, it also reduces switching costs because you're very focused on this particular type of task. Even for example, like let's say at 12 o'clock, you have a meeting with yourself to check your email, but you don't check it any other time. That is being very effective about blocking your work into different components at different times. So I recommend that. That's super helpful. And not even remote work, just in general, I feel like this is very helpful. So number 2 is to utilize break time at work or just taking breaks to be able to get some personal stuff done. So what I mean by this, I'm not insinuating that when you should be working, you take work off. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying with this is like you do have to schedule certain times to be off. And I recommend having some kind of cadence, maybe a timer to when you take a break. I actually find that some of the reason why we work 2 hours extra a day has a lot to do with we don't have water cooler breaks. We don't have other breaks. We're constantly focused on things. We're not as focused on creating and maintaining relationships because we're not in a building where we may run into each other or other people. It's very important that you take a break. I'm going to go for a walk, or I am going to go out and run out and grab groceries. Because personally, I find that going during the week, it's so much faster to go out and get groceries during the week. It's not nearly as busy on the weekends. Weekends is crazy. I just don't do that. I prefer to go like during the day, especially in the mornings. That's the best time to be able to go and get stuff done. Or, hey, throw out a load of laundry, when you're taking a break. Then that way you can have that done. That way when you are free from work, you're not taking up all that time. And the thing is, what's great about this is a lot of those tasks, you can throw it in, it does its thing, and then you come back and then throw it in the dryer. So it's stuff that it's very transactional. You go to it and it continues on. Or I do this a lot for slow cooker meals. I actually cook meals in slow cookers because I'm using time as a benefit to get things done. Go throw some food in a slow cooker and then come back to work. And so you need to do more of these kinds of tasks to be able to free you up to do things later when you are off from work, because then that allows you to be more effective with that time. You can do the same thing for personal stuff, but I would be careful about boundaries. Using personal time for work, I'd be careful about boundaries. But you could do that. Hey, I need to run this particular job, the data poll or something like that. You could go and log on real quick, run it, and then download it, or like let it run, and then you just download it later, and then the next day when you go into work, you're all prepared. You could do that. That's what I'm saying. It could work both ways, but just being able to do that is super important. So my number one tip is to know when enough is enough. As I kind of talked about how I break out my day, towards the end of the day, I kind of know when I'm going to be winding down because the type of task that I'm working on during that block, it's very obvious that I'm winding down and most of my energy has already been spent by that time, where most of it was spent between that 9 to 12 block that I'm super focused, super effective to get things done. What I would do here is just understand that, hey, we're getting towards the end of the day and you need to let things go. You need to figure out what that is for you because each person is a little bit different, but you have to be present in that moment to know, hey, enough is enough. I'm done for the day. Because what can happen is it can continue to blur into your day and then you're using your personal time to get work done. And again, I understand sometimes that's required because there's a big deliverable, big project. I get that. That totally makes sense. But I would say we do that far more often than we should. So just keep that in mind, is knowing when enough is enough and finding a good stopping point, putting it down and then coming back. I actually had an experience where I was working on something and I wanted to get it done. And I actually worked a little bit extra overtime because I knew I was going into a long weekend. So in that situation, it totally made sense because I know when I come back in on Monday, I'm not going to remember things. And in fact, not Monday, Tuesday. And when I came back and looked at it on Tuesday, I couldn't remember what I did. So that's why I'm saying, understand when enough is enough and when you're going to stop and build things in there to help you remind yourself of what you're doing so that way you can recall it is important. But again, you got to know when enough is enough. So I have a bonus tip, and I actually talk about this also in another video, is to set boundaries. And what this means is that for your work, your social, and your family life, you need to set boundaries, because if you don't create good boundaries, then people could take advantage of you. And what I mean by that is, like with work or with social settings, you need to be able to set good boundaries so that way people are not taking more of your time than they should be. And the thing is it's not any disrespect to the person, but at the same time, like, you are the person that's going to suffer from that, not them. I think what's interesting about this is that we care so much about what other people think. Truly, who we should care about what they think is us, and obviously our loved ones. But like, we truly, or at least I hope we do, we truly love ourselves more than we love others. But the thing is we should understand that other people's opinion of us are not as important as opinion of ourselves. Obviously, I'm going to be careful about this. You don't want to go violating a bunch of things. But what I'm trying to say with this is that by having these boundaries, you can protect yourself and your family and your work. Because because I think a lot of people have a misconception that it's like, hey, you're talking about working too much. But it could be other stuff. It could be like that your personal life is bleeding too much over into your work. And so you got to have some boundaries of that. For example, it's like, hey, you got to have somebody to be able to do this or do that. Like, you can't go and do that. So you got to have effective boundaries. That could be, like I said, social work setting. You got to have that, because if you don't have boundaries, then people can kind of just push and do what they need to do. So with that, those are my top tips on how to work effectively remote. Why, honestly, I probably will never work full-time in an office for the rest of my career unless I truly have to. And actually, I plan on talking about that a little bit more in an upcoming video, because a lot of people have asked me, hey, yeah, you work remotely, but would you go back in and work in person? I said, well, it depends. And I think it's a very situational thing, because I believe strongly that you can get just as much work done remotely, if not more remotely, than what you can do in person. But there are some caveats on why I do think being in person is good for certain things. And I'm going to talk about that in my next video. So with that, leave comments. I'd love to hear from you guys, see what you guys think. What are your tips on being able to work effectively remote? See you guys.